Okay, thank you so much for joining us again today. I know you flew in just this morning.
Right.
What's your reaction to the deal?
Well, obviously not democracy's finest hour. There should not be any victory laps being taken in Congress these days. This was completely unnecessary. It was a self-inflicted wound on the U.S. and global economy. And I'm afraid we're going to be paying a price for this for some time with slower job growth, slower economic growth, which is exactly what we need right now. But this may be the best Congress can do at the moment, given how polarized and how hyper-partisan things have gotten in Washington. So if this creates a little breathing space so we can get to some budget negotiations, get the government open, pay our bills so we don't go into default, well, we needed to do that, and we needed to have a strong vote last night.
A lot of people are frustrated. I know I'd like to come on here and just unload on you and get my frustrations off. It's not going to do a whole lot of good. What can we tell people who are really frustrated and really down on Congress right now? What's your first step moving forward?
Well, I think what we need to do, and I think the American people have to allow the representatives the ability to sit down and meet and talk and listen to each other and work hard to find common ground. And because the only path forward with divided government is through some bipartisan cooperation. But right now, a lot of that is being discouraged, where I've got some of my Republican colleagues who are saying they can't stand next to me, or they're going to be Tea Party primaried back home, or these powerful, wealthy outside groups will come in and carpet bomb them if they're not strictly towing the ideological line. And that's a recipe for gridlock and for government shutdown and us possibly defaulting on our financial responsibilities for the first time. So we need more cooperation and a higher level of responsibility from us representatives and a higher performance for the American people.
I believe some lawmakers when they say, you know, and you've said it a lot, I want to reach across the aisle and work with my counterparts. And I know that that can happen, but that doesn't sound like the problem. It sounds like the problem is a small group that, like you said, if anyone reaches across, they're going to be primaried. And how do you break that? How do you stop that? Because that's been going on for years now. You
know, what we witnessed over the last few weeks, a little more up close, is the civil war that's being raged in the National Republican Party between the so-called Tea Party caucus and more pragmatic members. And over the last couple of weeks, Charlie Dent and I, a friend of mine from Pennsylvania, have been organizing bipartisan meetings in the House. And the numbers kept growing because the frustration level with that small faction of holding everything else hostage in order to get their demands was wearing a little bit thin. So we just need to keep working. You know, our form of government was never meant to be easy. It's a lot of checks and a lot of balances. The easiest thing to do is to stop things and to break things down rather than getting things accomplished. And it's going to require, I think, better listening skills and a willingness to reach across the aisle to get things done.
What are some of the moderate lawmakers going to do now that we have two new deadlines in January and February for the budget and for the debt ceiling? What are some of you moderate lawmakers going to do to try to get a long-term deal?
Well, we're going to continue to meet, first of all. You know, Charlie Dent and I were bringing about 50 Republicans and Democrats together on a regular basis to talk about these budget issues, to find where there's some common ground, because we have to get our fiscal house in order. These long-term budget deficits are unsustainable, and we're setting the next generation up for failure or a legacy of debt, which is not fair to our children and grandchildren. So we know it's going to require some cooperation and both parties to link arms and jump into the icy waters together, because we got some difficult decisions to make for the American people.
I hear that. I hear compromise. I hear reaching across the aisle, long-term deal, and I just don't believe it. I just don't, because we've seen over years that, you know, this is what's supposed to be happening, and it's not.
Well, it's got to also start at the top, too, with the political leadership. And unfortunately, the water has been poisoned for so long at the very top that there's very little communication going on with the political leadership in our country. And that's what reason why a couple of backbenchers like me and Charlie had to take the initiative to bring members together from both parties in that. So we're going to need, I think, a greater effort at the top, which can also instill a better work ethic with all the members of Congress. But the American people are going to be the ultimate referee in this, Mark. You know, they have a choice to make, too. Are they going to encourage the representatives to do this, or are they going to encourage the representatives to don't negotiate, don't compromise, hold firm under every circumstance, even if it means shutting down the government? And that's, I think, is a choice the American people need to ask themselves.
Okay, so when American people are looking for their choice, I know I just watched a press conference you took earlier and you took a bit of a beating. I'm sure when you go to town halls you take a beating. If people can't just voice their frustration to you and they need to make a choice and it's up to them, what's one thing they can do now moving forward that's going to help grease the wheels on this and make it easier for the moderate lawmakers?
Well, I think we need communication for people. That's why I have listening sessions back home. I'm always traveling around the district to hear back from people And they need to let their representatives know, what type of performance they expect coming out of Washington and from their particular representative. Because that's where the change is really going to occur. I still believe that representatives are going to Washington trying to do the right thing. There may be different visions of what direction the country has to go in, but I also hope that they're responsive and listening to the people they represent back home.
And finally, you talk to colleagues a lot back there, but Congress's approval rating hasn't been lower. I don't think it's down at 5% out right now.
Yeah.
Are lawmakers nervous coming into this next election that their job is on the line?
Well, they should be, given the performance. And again, I believe that the American people deserve a much higher level of performance than what they see coming out of Washington these days. Because this has got to stop. I mean, jeopardizing the full faith and credit of the United States, doing economic damage when the Congress should be partnering with the private sector to help economic growth and the job creation that we need. A growing economy can solve a lot of these budget problems. And Congress is acting more as a hindrance to that growth rather than a partner in helping with it.
All right, we've reset the clock now for January and February. Hopefully, we can see some progress in the next coming weeks.
I hope so, because I hope we don't see some members trying to replay this card all over again, because I don't think the American people will put up with it. I think there will be more pushback from other members to prevent that from happening. What we need now is greater stability and a little more predictability, certainty in the marketplace, so businesses and families know what to expect. We cannot be governing from crisis to crisis and these short-term measures. We hear that all the time from folks back home, especially small business owners that aren't quite sure whether to hire that additional person or make that additional investment to help grow jobs. If they don't know about the dysfunction coming out of Washington, the natural reaction is just to freeze and to hold tight. And then, again, that jeopardizes the economic growth we need.
All right, for our web content viewers who are still here, what's one thing people should be focusing on just in the next coming days or coming weeks?
Well, I think the budget negotiations that are coming up right now are going to be important. And I think there are some low-hanging fruit that we can hopefully achieve together. And it's the longer-term unfunded bills that we have to be concerned about. I hope we strike the right balance mark. We have to get our fiscal house in order. It's rising health care costs. It's outdated weapons programs that are very expensive, we can no longer afford. But there are also important public investments that we have to be making in education, job training, broadband access, basic research. That's the seed corn we need to be planting today to reap a bountiful harvest tomorrow. But those are the programs that are getting slashed and wiped out now. And again, it's going to set the next generation up for failure rather than success in this very competitive global economy.